Friday, September 22nd, 2023, a day that will live in infamy for the nation of Canada, the Great White North, America's more friendly neighbor, Britain's ginger stepchild with better dental hygiene, basically Australia if they ditched the insane accent.
You know what I mean? Like if there was like an Australian guy in the office on 9/11, it was like, off, look out!
This day would go down as Canada's 9/11. What's up, gays? Welcome to another edition of something that I saw on Twitter. The Canadian government would openly honor a Ukrainian World War II veteran, Yaroslav Hunka, which turns out, with very minimal Googling required, Hunka actually did fight in World War II, but for the Nazis.
Probably know this memorial to the 6 million Jews killed in the Holocaust, but you may not have seen this one dedicated to the queer victims of the Nazis.
Uh-oh, SpaghettiOs! Major Woopsie! Our bad guys! Big whoops! Government made a no-no! Oh, I'm so sorry. The government made a big mistake. Boo-boo whoopsies. Oh no. How are we supposed to know? We're just a little government who has an overbloated roster of employees and probably interns who definitely couldn't have researched this because they were getting coffee. The coffee machine's been broken in the government for a week. As I said, this all started on Friday with Ukraine's fearless leader slash literal stand-up comedian, Volodomyr Zelensky,
If Russian missiles attack us, we'll do our best to protect ourselves. If they attack us with Iranian drones,
he came to Canada on a diplomatic mission to beg for more money because his country is being raped by Russia. Being raped to death by Russia. But I heard on CNN that Russia is totally losing the war. Fucking grow up. In what world is Russia losing this war, imaginary person? And I should know because I get all my Russo-Ukrainian war data from leaked military documents on a Minecraft server. After Zelensky collected his $650 million from his hose. No, seriously, look at her face. This is Chrystia Freeland, Canada's Minister of Finance. Why does she look so grateful to murder a bunch of young men? For real, this is only going to take the lives of young, idealistic Ukrainian and Russian men. Politicians are reptiles. They have no souls. I mean, these kids' deaths will be meaningless. They're gonna die over bureaucratic border disputes. Best case scenario is somebody manages to break through and broker some kind of peace treaty between the two nations, and in 6 months' time, the entire world is gonna forget that this war ever even happened, and their deaths will literally have been for nothing. Worst case scenario is this is a precursor to World War III, where we enact a nuclear-propelled extinction level event, aka the Great Reset, and their deaths were a catalyst for catastrophe. Anyways, like I was saying, these smooth-brained, emotion-mimicking reptilians end up giving Zelensky $650 million in Canadian cash. So he can then, according to this 60 Minutes report, spend it all on salaries, dog training, etc.
We discovered the US government's buying seeds and fertilizer for Ukrainian farmers and covering the salaries of Ukraine's first responders, all 57,000 of them. That includes the team that trains this rescue dog to comb through the wreckage of Russian strikes looking for survivors.
So instead of trying to reach a peace deal, we're gonna keep this country on life support so we can drain their population and NATO can seize control of their abundance of natural resources and strategic access to the Black Sea. Cool. Sounds like a good idea. Training dogs to sift through the rubble of inaccurate drone strikes to find the remains of innocent civilians. That seems like a great long-term plan. So after the government forked over the cash, it's time for the most important part of any diplomatic mission. Public Parliament display! were the least human humans you've ever seen replicate emotions with gay speeches and patting each other on the back while being filmed so they can send it to the government-controlled, funded media groups to get social clout. But while Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's cabinet were too busy feeling self-righteous about being on the right side of history, parading Ukrainians around the parliament to show you that they have souls and they're definitely not reptilians, they forgot to actually look up the history of one of their esteemed guests. Yaroslav Hunka is a Ukrainian national who emigrated to Canada post-World War II. On paper, it sounds nice. In World War II, Hunka fought against Russia with the Ukrainian forces to liberate them from Soviet rule. But if you're familiar with World War II, you would know that Russia was part of the Allies. In fact, I think most historians would agree that Russia won the war against Nazi Germany. Hunka would fight with the 1st Division Ukrainian National Army in World War II before immigrating to Canada. But 1st Division was also the name for the 14th Waffen Grenadier Division of Hitler's SS, the military wing of the Nazi Party. During the Nuremberg trials, the Waffen-SS would be labeled a criminal organization responsible for, quote, persecution and extermination of the Jews, brutalities and killings in concentration camps, excesses in the administration of occupied territories, and administration of the slave labor program, and the treatment and murder of prisoners. After World War II, a Canadian-Ukrainian, Bohan Panchuk, smuggled in as many as 2,000 Ukrainian Waffen-SS into Canada as refugees. With just days prior to the emigration, the unit would be rebranded from the Waffen-SS into the 1st Division Ukrainian National Army, an obvious ploy to obfuscate their association with Hitler's SS. You see, Ukraine is a country who have had its complicated relationship with neo-Nazism. For example, the Azov Brigade, an openly neo-Nazi paramilitary group that seemingly was funded by NATO to incite the Maidan massacre in 2014 to overthrow the Ukrainian government to install a pro-NATO government, who was then promoted to Ukraine's National Guard at the start of the Russo-Ukrainian War, who again are openly neo-Nazis. Their actual logo is a variation of the German SS symbol. And on a probably unrelated side note, Freeland's grandfather was the editor of a Nazi newspaper, which I read for the articles. After the obvious backlash over the weekend, on Sunday, Speaker of the House Anthony Rota put out a now-deleted press release essentially apologizing without ever mentioning what he was apologizing for, but he did let the Jews know not to be mad at anyone else but him because he acted alone. So no need to be angry at the government. How convenient and nice of him to let the Jews know exactly who to be mad at. On Monday, during a parliamentary assembly, Rota half apologized again, reminding the Jews, everyone, that it is solely his fault for supporting a Nazi.
I would also like to add that this initiative was entirely my own.
Even though the entire parliament gave him a standing ovation. Conservative MP Andrew Scheer said this at the assembly.
That raises serious concerns. What kind of message does that send to our allies around the world? That when they come to the House of Commons...
Look at the smirk on this dork's face. He's so happy to slam some libs. He's definitely edging to this later tonight. You could feel him getting lathered up on this mid-slam with his bobblehead in the background. Reptiles! Is politics just theater class for the kids who weren't emotionally developed enough to understand and replicate human emotions? Everything just seems so performative and hollow. Damn, maybe that's the point. Maybe it's just meta-irony. Is politics Kino? Conservative MP Michelle Rempel Gardner actually seems pretty base, calling out the libs for trying to paint this as a collective failure. She wasn't having it.
Based on what I've heard in the House today, I feel like this is the government trying to collectivize responsibility for an incident that was solely within their purview.
The libs then tried to get a vote going to have this stricken from the record, as in they would never be allowed to mention it again. Thankfully, it needed to be a unanimous vote, and it failed quickly.
All those opposed to the Honourable Ministers moving the motion will please say nay. We don't have unanimous consent.
After the Parliamentary Assembly, Trudeau gets asked by some reporters what his thoughts were on the situation, and of course he just doesn't really acknowledge that anything went wrong, but does blame Speaker of the House Anthony Rota.
Obviously it's extremely upsetting that this happened. The Speaker has acknowledged his mistake.
as well as oddly blames Russian disinformation for this.
It's going to be really important that all of us push back against Russian propaganda, Russian disinformation, and continue our steadfast...
I don't know if that was like just schizophrenic and unrelated and him just trying to change topics, or he was trying to insinuate that the idea that this guy was a Nazi is Russian disinformation. Either way, it is retarded. And lastly, I will leave you with this meme, which I think sums up the entire situation pretty nicely. How it started. Trudeau accuses conservatives of standing with people who wave swastikas during heated debate in House. How it's going. Fury after Zelensky and Trudeau gave World War II Nazi unit veteran a standing ovation.